Welcome to the Crypto Teacher. And guys, you know I come back with that second video just to make you think. And this is going to be on Steve Mnuchin, the man behind the money. Enjoy.
Glad to have Steve Mnuchin join us today. So you were one of very few private investors who were allowed by the government to purchase. You purchased IndyMac to purchase a failed bank. Why were you allowed to do that? Why were you one of the handful?
Well, first of all, what I'd say is we bought IndyMac in December of 2008. And as you recall, it was just about the bottom of the markets and when there was a lot of concern about the banking sector overall. IndyMac traditionally was really more of a mortgage bank than a bank. So a lot of the strategic banks were not interested in IndyMac. So I think, we were excited that we were able to put together private capital to come into the banking sector, really when the banking sector needed support, and buy IndyMac as a going concern. And I think in that sense, the FDIC found that very compelling.
So your investor team includes some very big names: Flowers, Paulson, Michael Dell's financial arm, George Soros Fund. What was their mandate to you as chairman of now One West Bank? What do they want you to accomplish?
Well, I think one of the things, and I think one of the advantages for us is that we've had a very supportive investor group that are private investors and are focused on us building the long-term value of the bank. So really, the objective from day one was to take IndyMac, rebrand it, and use it as a platform to grow in California on the West Coast. So we ended up 2 years later, we've rebranded it. We also bought First Fed of Santa Monica and La Jolla Bank. We put them all together, and we now have the largest bank headquartered in Southern California. So that really was the mandate from day one, to try to grow it and create a significant regional bank.
In that video, guys, you saw where Steve Mnuchin speaks about investors, and she says George Soros. Guys, remember, this is all planned out. Basically, they purchased IndyMac and then, of course, renamed it into One West Bank so they could do what? Commit fraud. It's all planned out.
We turn now to Trump's pick for Treasury Secretary, Steven Mnuchin, who faces scrutiny for his role at One West, a bank which has been called a foreclosure machine that profited from the collapse of the housing market. On Tuesday, The Intercept reported on a newly obtained memo that reveals Mnuchin may have engaged in widespread misconduct while foreclosing on homeowners. The memo argued One West was guilty of a host of infractions, including backdating mortgage documents to speed up foreclosures and manipulating the results of home auctions. And it urged California's Attorney General then to sue.
Mnuchin's hedge fund bought out the failing California bank IndyMac in 2008, renaming it One West. Under his ownership, it foreclosed on 36,000 families, particularly elderly residents trapped in reverse mortgages.
It's a year-long investigation that they conducted into One West, finding well over 1,000 violations of California's foreclosure process. California is a non-judicial state. The courts are not involved in foreclosures, but there are very precise steps that lenders are supposed to take when they foreclose on a homeowner. And One West was found to have violated these. It was a somewhat limited investigation because One West is a national bank and states don't have the jurisdiction to do widespread investigation of them, but they found over 1,000 violations just in this limited investigation. And if they did file a civil enforcement action, there would be a discovery period where they extrapolated the deputies that they could find thousands more violations. So they requested authorization to file this action, and the California Attorney General's office did not move on that.
And the California Attorney General, of course, was now the current California Senator, right, Kamala Harris.
It was given to these deputies as to why Harris decided not to move forward with the case. There's a lot of speculation, but now we're seeing sort of the blowback from failing to prosecute these banks and these top executives. Now one is potentially going to be the Treasury Secretary.
And this issue of backdating documents, because obviously the mortgage fraud crisis was there was the original problem of all of the high interest loans and no doc loans that were issued. But then after the collapse, the financial collapse, there were all the banks and financial institutions that came in to so-called clean up the mess, and then engaged in massive fraud in terms of documentation of who owned what loan and who had paid back what. Talk about the importance of One West in this second stage of the crisis.
Yes, One West was definitely part of that cleanup crew. They were built out of the ashes of IndyMac, which was a failed lender that originated really bad, toxic mortgages. And One West was brought in, and they engaged in a number of practices to do foreclosures. The backdating scandal here was they would file notices of default, and that sort of kicks off the foreclosure process here in California, without actually designating what is known as a trustee that would engage in the foreclosure sale. And so when they would do that document to designate the trustee, to make it look like the notice of default was done correctly, they would backdate the document. And the way that the deputies at the AG's office figured this out is that some of the documents were backdated so far back it was before One West became a bank. One West was inaugurated as a bank in March of 2009, and some of the documents had dates before that, that they were executing these what are known as substitutions of trustee before One West even became into being.
We had One West Bank rise out of the financial crisis in 2008. Of course, we had banks like Goldman Sachs who benefited, during the crisis. But then also, of course, they had banks set up after the crisis to benefit. And of course, One West Bank was one of those. Now, we see how they were definitely busted by backdating documents. But who was in place? Kamala Harris. And now we see Kamala Harris be pushed up in front where she was running for president, and I will fall out personally if she becomes vice president. But you see how they keep the pieces in line. Now, what's important about crypto is that you had Brian Brooks, who was the attorney inside of One West Bank, who is now what? The comptroller. Brian Brooks was the cleanup crew at One West. And now his job is to get us over to cryptocurrency. And I've done a video on that. I also did a video previously on One West.
Let's talk about another issue, and that is the suspension of payroll taxes, which even a number of Republican senators oppose. There are two issues there seem to be here. First of all, suspending payroll taxes doesn't help the millions of people who are out of jobs and don't have to pay payroll taxes, so they don't get a benefit there. And it's also not a payroll tax cut. It's a payroll tax suspension. Isn't there a danger that a lot of businesses won't pass these savings through to workers because they're going to hold on to the money in as much as at some point, according to this executive action by the end of the year, those payroll taxes are going to have to be paid anyway?
Well, Chris, the president wanted to do a payroll tax cut. We could do the payroll tax deferral. He's going to go to the American people and tell them that when he's reelected, he will push through legislation to forgive that. So in essence, it will turn into a payroll tax cut. But
we saw Steve Mnuchin speak about the payroll tax cut. Now, I did a couple of videos yesterday, but I wanted to give you a backdrop of who he is, so therefore you could understand the comments in that video. Now, he clearly said there will be a payroll tax deferral, not a payroll tax cut. A deferral means that they're just pushing it back, but you're going to have to pay for it later. But he snuck it in there, so of course, if you're just listening to it, you wouldn't have never noticed it. But then he stated that if Trump is elected, then he would try to push to have it cut. They know they cannot do a payroll tax cut. Trump knows he can't do a payroll tax cut. This is just a Hegelian dialect, Democrat versus Republican. Do not fall for it. They all work on the same team. Money does not fight money, guys. Need for you to wake up. Enjoy your day.